I shared my full review of the brand new Nikon D500 last week. Now it's time to move into some detailed videos. Today I'm going to take you on a tour of the D500's body. I'll show you all of the buttons and all of the dials, plus the levers, connectors, and doors, everything. Let's start with the front of the camera where you can see the D500 logo, the Nikon name, and the special red stripe that is Nikon's trademark. Also on this side at the top is the self-timer lamp. This flashes when you are using the self-timer to let you know that a photo is about to be taken. Under that, here is one of the stereo microphones. You have two here on the front of the body. The other is over here under the D500 logo. They record sound during video recording. This here is the sub-command dial. The main command dial is on the back of the body, and I'll show that to you in a minute. You use these by themselves and in combination with buttons on the body to make settings changes. This button says PV. If you press this button while you are using live view, the camera switches to the maximum aperture so you can better preview focus. This does actually change the aperture though, so you have to either press the button again or autofocus to switch back to whatever aperture you had before. The other button on this side is labeled FN1. That is your first function button. In the custom settings menu, you can assign this button to do a number of things for you. I'll talk more about that in another video, but here's a quick look at your options. In the middle here is the body cap where you affix your lens. And moving over here, we already saw the stereo microphone. This button says BKT on it. It is your bracketing button. You press this button and turn the command dials to choose the number of shots and the exposure increment when you are bracketing. I'll talk more about these things in my detailed menu walkthrough videos. Here you have two covers. When you open them, you'll see a couple connectors. The top one is the flash sync terminal for when you are using a flash sync cable. The bottom is the 10-pin remote terminal for connecting a GPS unit. This here is your lens mounting mark and the lens release button. You line up with the lens mounting mark with the same mark on your lens when putting your lens on, and then press the lens release button to take the lens off. The last things here are the autofocus controls. The switch is the focus mode selector. You choose M for manual or AF for autofocus here. The button in the middle is the autofocus mode button. You use this in combination with the command dials to choose your specific autofocus modes, which determine how autofocus behaves. Moving to this side of the body, you see the neck strap eyelet. Then under it, there is a series of covers. Under the top cover is the USB connector for when you need to connect to something via a USB cable. For example, if you'd like to transfer images to your computer via a cable. The next door covers two connectors, the headphone connector and the external microphone connector. Those can be handy when you're shooting video. Opening the last cover here reveals the HDMI connector. You might use that to connect the camera to an external monitor, or I sometimes use it to record screens for video. Moving over to the other side, you can see the other neck strap eyelet, and then you have two other things. The first and most obvious is the big door. It opens to reveal the memory card slots. In this case, one XQD card slot and one SD card slot. Closing that back up, you can see this N mark. This is for connecting wirelessly to devices using NFC. Let's look at the bottom of the camera now. This here covers the contact for the battery grip, which can be purchased separately. In the middle is the tripod socket. And here you have the battery chamber cover, which opens to show the battery. This little thing here is related. It is the power connector cover. You take this little plug out if you're using the AC power adapter instead of the battery, and it is also something that you can purchase separately. Now for the top of the camera. Let me point out that you can see the sub-command dial here, as well as the main command dial on the back of the camera. Then let's start with the power switch, which also has an extra toggle to illuminate the control panel here. In the middle of the power switch is the shutter release button. This is the movie record button. Next to that is the ISO button, which you use with the command dials to set ISO sensitivity and auto ISO. This button also says format under it. That's because it can also be used with the trash can button on the back of the camera, which I'll show you soon, to format your memory cards by pressing the buttons at the same time. And then here is the exposure compensation button. You set exposure compensation by using this button in combination with the command dials. There is a small dot next to this button, which I'll explain in a moment. Here is the control panel. This shows you a handful of your camera's settings like mode and ISO sensitivity. In the middle is the accessory shoe. You can attach your speed light here. Next to this is a little mark. This is your focal plane mark. This is where the camera focuses from. It is helpful if you are trying to measure the distance from your camera to your subject. Now over on this side is the quality button. This is used in combination with the command dials to choose your image quality and size. You see a familiar green dot on this button as well. When you press the quality button and the exposure compensation button at the same time for at least 2 seconds, you will restore the camera to its default settings. This can be helpful if you make a bunch of changes in the menus. Maybe you're just playing around and you end up a bit confused because your camera isn't working quite like you expect. If you set your camera back to default settings, it's a little bit easier to get restarted. This is the metering mode button. You use this in combination with the main command dial to choose your metering mode. This is the mode button, which you use with the main command dial to choose your exposure mode, P, A, S, or M. And this is the white balance button. You press this and turn the main command dial to choose your white balance setting. Now you can see a button here. This is the release mode dial lock release. You use this with the release mode dial, which you can see here. When you press the button, you can turn the dial and select your release mode, like single or continuous or self-timer. Okay, moving to the back of the body where we have a whole slew of buttons and dials. In the top middle is the viewfinder. You use this lever here to cover the viewfinder when needed. Then here you can see a dial. It is the diopter adjustment control. You can change the focus that you see in the viewfinder using this dial. This is handy for people that wear glasses and want to be able to see through the viewfinder without wearing their glasses. Beneath that is the LCD screen. This is tiltable up or down so that you can use live view and see the screen even when it is below or above your face. And it clicks into place like this. It is also a touch screen, which you can configure in the menus, and I'll show you more of that in a detailed menu video. Now over here is a speaker, which is used during video playback. This here is called the sub selector. It is a little nubby joystick, which you can use for a few different things. You can select your autofocus point. You can lock focus and exposure when it is pressed down. You can also assign this to do a few other things, but I'll get into that more in my detailed menu videos. This button says AF on. It autofocuses the camera, just like when you half press the shutter release button. If you've ever heard the term back button autofocusing, this is a button they were talking about. You can customize how this button behaves in the menus, so you'll hear more about it in the detailed menu videos. Over here is the main command dial. Like the sub command dial on the front of the body, you use this on its own or in combination with buttons to change settings. This is the multi-selector. You do a variety of things with this. It tilts 4 ways and there is a button in the center. It is how you choose a focus area or navigate and make selections in the menus. It's also how you scroll through photos and playback. Around the multi-selector is the focus selector lock. When you move this to L, you lock your autofocus point. This little spot here is the memory card access lamp. When it is illuminated, the memory card is being accessed. That way, you know not to pull the card out. And this is the I button. Pressing it brings up a list of commonly used menu items. Pressing it during live view shooting brings up a list of settings options as well. Near that is the info button. Pressing it brings up the info screen on your LCD monitor. It shows you different settings of the camera. Pressing it during live view shooting changes the information displayed on the screen. This is the live view button. It turns live view on. Around the live view button is a switch that sets if you are in still photography live view shooting or video live view shooting. Over on this side is the trash can button. During playback, you can delete photos with it. It also says format under it in red, just like the ISO button did on the top of the camera. And like I said before, pressing those 2 buttons at the same time for at least 2 seconds will initiate formatting your memory card. Next is the playback button. This brings up the images and video that you have captured. Going down the side here, first is the menu button. This brings up your menus. The next button has a key on it and also has 2 little pictures next to it, a question mark and the picture control icon. Pressing this button while in playback will protect your image from deletion, hence the key, if you are using the delete menu option. It won't protect the image if you are formatting the memory cards though. The question mark means that it is also the help button. If you see a question mark on your LCD screen here, in the menus for example, you can press and hold this button to learn more about that item. Last, if there is nothing on the LCD screen and you press the button, it brings up your picture control menu options. The next button is the zoom in button. When you are in playback, it will decrease the number of thumbnails on the screen or zoom into the image if only one is on screen. When you are in live view, it will zoom into your focus area so that you can check focus. The next button is the Zoom Out and Flash Mode button. When it comes to zooming, it does the opposite of the Zoom In button. As for Flash Mode, if you press this button when you have a flash on the camera and are not in playback or live view, it will bring up Flash Mode menu options. The OK button is similar to the middle button of the multi-selector because you can select or confirm decisions with it, but sometimes the camera will request that you need to specifically use it rather than the multi-selector. And the very last thing we'll talk about is the button that says FN2. That is your second function button. It's just like the function 1 button on the front of the body, and in the custom settings menu, you can assign this button to do a number of things for you. I'll talk more about that in another video. That's all for the body of the Nikon D500. It's a camera with lots going on the body. Some of it you'll use often, some barely at all, but it's all there for you to use as you will. In my next Nikon D500 video, I will take you on an overview of the menus.